Actually, for the man I'm going to talk about, it's no longer a nickname.
Yeah.
It's actually his. It was part of all his documentation, travel documents, and school documents, and all. The man I'm talking about today is Vincent Chati Kyadondo. Kyadondo is actually his surname.
Yeah.
All the basketball people out there, and also the sports fraternity, because this is a legend, probably don't know the Kyadondo name because we've called him Chatty since we were kids, and he's been around basketball for forever. He's one of the greatest players, Ugandan players of all time. Vincent Chatty. Now, I'll put it in perspective for you guys and for the fraternity out there watching.
Yeah.
There are 4 guys that I consider to be in that conversation, the highest conversation for GOAT, for greatest of all time. There's a second tier of so many guys that can come into the conversation, depending on who you're talking to. And then there's a third tier, which is totally different. Now, the 4 guys I'm talking about Vincent Chatty, who I'm going to talk about. But I'm talking about Stephen Omonyi, I'm talking about Norman Blick, and I'm talking about, no, I'm talking about, now look at this man here. I'm talking about our current Silverbacks captain.
Yeah.
Do you remember who that is?
Jimmy and Abu.
Yeah, okay. So those 4
Yeah.
are up there. Jimmy and Abu, Steve Omonyi, Norman Blick, and Vincent Chatty. Now, there's that second tier like I was talking about. There are guys who, in the past I can talk about, say, Henry Musisi and Robert Ndamaje. I can come and talk about Henry Malinga. I talked
and
about
Ben Komakech.
yeah, Richard. I can talk about, say, Isaac Afidra, especially for his longevity. Somebody who needs to be in a conversation like that. And Ben Komakech you just talked about. And him and, say, a guy like Ken Baliejusa.
Yeah.
But then there were guys who were also in between. Guys who had the potential to become God, didn't play long and left for the US. Aaron Ochamring and Paul O'Doul, or you can talk about the late Wilbur Okecho. So, but that's spanning an entire generation. But the other 4 guys are heads and shoulders for me.
Yeah.
I said
No, he said in the
Norman Blake, Stephen Omonyi, Jimmy and Abu, and Vincent Chatty are the 4 guys I've talked about. Yeah, we're going to have we're going to have another category, Andrew. This one because of our foreign-based religion now. I mean, a thing that was started by Stanley Ochiti. Now you've even got naturalized guys. We have got an NBA player at the Phoenix Suns in Ishmael Wainwright. We've got somebody playing for Barcelona in the EuroLeague in Brandon Davis. We've got guys there whose careers are still on, that they can go anywhere. Dengo, who is playing in the D-League with Texas Legends, or say Adam Seiko, who's playing college ball. You have a guy like Arthur Kaluma. We don't know where that career is going. But that could be the GOAT of GOATs in Uganda basketball ever. That's a different category. But the guys who played in a domestic league, these 4 are head and shoulders above. Vincent Chatty is one of those. But he came before his time, if you like. I like to say that of people like him. If say like Philip Bongole retire, if he still sang today, what do you think would happen if Chatty could play? If Chatty was 25 today and he played basketball today,
probably wouldn't
because
be
the guys, many guys who I'm talking who might not have seen him. It would be absolutely crazy. It's like you pull out now a cassette, an old cassette of Philip Bongole. It has to play every Christmas. Many musicians will not be able to have music that lasts 30, 40 years. Now Chatty,
Did you say 40 years a month?
Yeah, I know, but this guy, every Christmas we have to pull it out, no matter when. You see, understand? So that is Vincent Chatty for you. When I say came before his time, I'm talking about a guy who could dribble the ball. We call it the handle. Dribble the ball like Allen Iverson or Kyrie Irving and shoot it like Steph Curry. And I am not exaggerating. Because Vincent Chatty with his friends, William Emong and Nicholas Agonda, these guys used to shoot hundreds of threes on pool court with people rebounding for them and all, to become as good as they were as shooters. But his basketball story doesn't even start at pool court or Makerere. Vincent Chatty, now let me go back. This guy, born 1961, is going to be 61 this April. Born in Kamengo, because he grew up on his mother's side, and all. His father actually, the surveyor called Henry Ole, came from Katende, so on Masaka Road, but has a family home in Namasuba, and all. I'll say something about that. So Vincent Chatty, this is a guy, his brother, Hughes Waswa. He had a brother, Mlongo brother, called Waswa with an exotic name called Hughes. Took him to, got a job after graduating. Got a job with a Madvani company, Ramisi Sugar. and took him to Mombasa. So he went to Mombasa, got into school there, started school. I'm talking about 1976.
Okay.
Went into school there, studied at a private school called Tom Boyer. The brother left that company, went into Bamburi, which was even closer to Mombasa. The first one was like some 40 kilometers further south of Mombasa towards Tanzania. So they come back into here. He went to a high school called Shimolatewa. That's for his secondary school education, and that's where the real basketball story starts. Guy walks into school as an S1, admires the guys who are playing basketball and wants to play that game, but doesn't have the opportunities. The kids like him only got onto court at odd hours because the big boys would come and chase them off the court. So he could play like at midday, odd hours, like things like that. But he was already a good footballer and also a good volleyball player. So by the end of S1, going into S2, he asked the school prefect to give him a ball because he so admired the game of basketball. They give him a worn-out ball. So he takes it home for the holidays. Remember, he's a coastal boy now. He lives in Mombasa. Coconut tree in the compound, cuts out the bottom of a bucket, sticks it up there, and starts to shoot millions and millions of shots. As a kid, this is a kid in S1. And then starts to teach himself how to dribble and everything. Goes back to school, he's getting better. S2, he's in there, he's got really good. To the point where the head teacher had to step in because they were competing times. Volleyball, basketball, and football being played at the same time. And the teachers, I think, were basically, they were trying to tear him apart. Everybody's trying to take him to his place and all, to their game and all. The head teacher steps in and says, guy, let the kid choose. And the kid chooses basketball.
Yeah.
By S3, he was on the school team. That was unheard of back then in Kenya. An S3 kid has walked into the school team. He had become that good as a dribbler and a point guard. One of the things that was happening, as he's got a lot of family abroad, especially in Canada. He had a sister who was there, and she used to record these old NBA games, the ones which had been like 3 weeks old or that kind of thing, record and send them over to him. So he modeled himself on some of those players. Admired them. He was too small. Yeah. He was never going to dunk or anything. But he learned a lot of skills off those videos. And one of the guy he talks about, which is actually, which explains itself a lot, is Magic Johnson. This is the guy he loved to, he learned his passing and his dribbling and everything, watching Magic Johnson. And Chatty could pass the ball all day. This is a guy who could shoot and score 40, 50 easy at the peak of his powers. I mean, we watched this guy as a kid, and then we became teammates. Yeah. He could shoot 40, 50 easy, 30, 40, 50 again easy. But that was double-digit assists because he used to pass the ball like crazy. And he had picked up the skills there. So anyway, his time in Nairobi, I mean, in Mombasa, he had grown up to play with the school team. They were playing against KPA, Kenya Ports Authority, and all the teams in the region and everything. His time ends. His brother, this is now 81, his brother moves the family to Canada, and Chatty has to move back to Uganda. He comes over here. Most people actually thought that Chatty was a Makerere University student because, like I said, there was a lot around Pool Court a lot, and all played his basketball in Makerere. But he had actually gone to he went to Elgon Technical College and did a motor vehicle technician's course. That's what he did. Later, he would do a computer course at MTAC to continue his qualifications. And he worked for the sister who brought him back here had a tour company which he worked for. And then that was before he actually then worked for the late Vice President, Dr. Samson Chiseka. Took him to that flower farm that he started. You remember Pearl Flowers? You guys
I do.
You remember that? Eh? Yeah. It was an EADB sponsored project, and all Chatty worked there for 2 years before then he joined the British Council.
That's before Temangalo was famous because the flowers came from
and it was there, and it was in Temangalo. So he worked there for before then he joined British Council. A basketball friend of his took him over to British Council. Mutumba, Patrick Mutumba, he calls him Mutombo fondly, and Mutumba is somebody again we played with, who took him to British Council, joined the education section there, and worked there for 17 years until his retirement. But in between, there was basketball. When he first came back from Mombasa back to Kampala, his sister was living in Bugolobi. So, and there was a sister whose tour company he was running. Yeah? So he goes in there and looks for where is basketball. This is he's hot. He's been in Mombasa playing ball, and finds Wananchi. They had a basketball club. They had a hockey club. They had a handball club. So he joins the basketball. Finds the guys who are there. Some of the guys we found later when they were older. Just say Mandy was his captain. captain. There was Hastings Kira, somebody I played with at Blue Jackets. There was Otim, there was Kenneth Olum. Those guys, they played. They were the best team in the country at the time, but they were struggling to make 10 players. So they would have to. They were going around playing basketball games, but they'd have to manage time. They'd have to manage fouls and everything because sometimes they would not be 10. But they were the best team in the country. So that's Wanaji. What happened though for him is that now mid to late 80s, other teams started to come up. The Army came up with a team, UNLA. They had some tournaments that he would go. They would pick players from Wanaji and they'd go and play for them. UCB started a basketball team. Now for me, I first watched Chatty playing for UCB in the late 80s, coming out of Kasasa with the basketball team. Would come to go for tournaments and all. Then also SMAC after that. And then would find these guys playing, and we were in admiration and awe. This is a guy who used to put on a show, Chatty. That team was managed by the senior Chihu Guru, who most of you know from rallying times and all, but that UCB team. But the Chatty played for it with Godwin Chihu Guru, the younger brother, and people like Nicholas Ogoda, the guys I just talked about there, they played in there. Their warm-up routine. We used to sit at the court side and just marvel at this. I'd said I was already a football player, but I said I must become a good basketball player. Just watching these guys, Chatty, ball between the legs, behind the back, just layup routines and all. Crazy stuff Chatty was doing. It was like Harlem Globetrotters, watching the Harlem Globetrotters with their track suits and things and all. UCB. They also played for Bank of Uganda then. So that's when now teams were coming up. But SMAC was producing basketball players, other high schools were producing players, and then teams were popping up. Andrew Baker, so and the guys started Rhinos. Andrew Baker was one of the guys who's contributed most to Uganda basketball development with what they did with Charging Rhinos and what eventually came out of there. And then Chambogo Warriors popped up, teams began to pop up. So the Chatties were playing, they continued to play. They were the dominant guys. Everybody, they were the ones who admired and from whom we learned the basketball. Chatty decides that is now early 90s to form his own club. Okay. That's Blue Jackets. With the help of Era Mugisha. Era Mugisha was the sports tutor at Makerere. I'm sure you know that name. Yeah. He allowed him to be able to use pool court when it wasn't being used by the university students and everything. So that's where Blue Jackets was born, and that's where.
And your dream came true.
That's why guys like us came in. Guys like us came into the picture. So Chatty forms Blue Jackets. They competed against Rhino. Power also came up. I talked about Chambogo Warriors and a few other teams. They pop up there. And I remember in between there, before I go back to the clubs, I remember one of the things that I remember really is that there was a time, the national team, they called up the national team to go and play Zone 5 in Ethiopia. They called up those guys, and then they called up some students. And then two of the students were from SMAC. One was Patrick Oketa, one was yours truly. And the brother could not allow us to go, Brother Tinker. Refused us to go for that summons. But the other two students I remember on that team that went to Ethiopia were Robert Ndamaje and Joe Brewer. For them, they were in Kampala schools here, and they were playing basketball and all. So Chatty, they went to to Ethiopia. He was a starter. Him and Henry Musisi and William Emong and Dr. Antare, who was played for Rhino, who they led Dr. Antare, and a policeman called Sam Okorimo. They went in there with a bench that had people like Moffat Masaba, Nicholas Agonda, and I just talked about Ndamaji and Brewer. William Kamanyere, I think, took them as he was there as the manager, and they had a coach from the guy who was leading football was their coach, Alphonse Okello, somebody like that. I remember that. But at that time, that's when those clubs were forming. So we come in there, and Chatty is teaching us the game. We are big-headed. You're coming from high school into Makerere University. You think you're very good. You know it all. It was a challenge. One of the challenges he talks about he had, and bringing us through. And so we join up there and start to play with him. I remember 1995. Then when the league was on, the real league came into being. The league started. Makerere University stopped us from playing for our clubs. Blue Jackets guys, Power, we all went assembled and won the league with Makerere University. But that is because we were weakening the teams. But Chatty had been now bringing us up. He had challenges with Blue Jackets. Guys like Moffat Masaba, I just talked about him. He was a star volleyball player. Scarcely available for the basketball. There was myself and Nimrod Kaboha who were playing in the league in football. Nimrod for maybe myself for Dairy, and would only show up for matches sometimes without training and things like that. So he was having challenges, all these challenges with this Blue Jackets thing. But he was bringing up kids, especially university kids. And one of the things I remember he used to tell us is not to cut class, not to cut lectures and all. But make sure that we do those and then come and play.
And train,
so he brought us through. From the other kids came in, Mark Epelu, Godfrey Magadu, William Zarubara, Robert Kasekende. I'm sure you've heard of these basketball names. These are guys who came through Chatty's hands. And the biggest of all of us to come through Chatty's hands was Steve Omonyi, who I've just told you is one of the greatest. Of course, Omonyi credits his basketball to Chatty, as with so many hundreds of kids. In the same way as I talked about Samuel Lusimbi and cricket the other day. Same thing with Chatty. They represent the same thing in these sports. And Chatty tells you, Omonyi is so kind to call me the guy who taught him basketball. But he always, a star is always a star. Everything I taught Omonyi, he executed 10 times better. That kind of thing. And that kid, so we continued to play. But the other guy was gifted. These blessings come in a certain way. Stephen Omonyi was a different animal. So anyway, they, like I said, Charging Rhino is powerful. Power has brought Manute Ball in from the retiring from the NBA and the Sixers and all. They're winning championships in '96 and all.
Then Falcons dive in.
Then from Blue Jackets is born Falcons. John Simbwa forms a breakaway faction from Blue Jackets. So the Chatties sit down and they say, you know what? Those of you who want to go with Simba, you can go. The rest of us stay. So guys chose to stay. Simba took a healthy chunk of the players. They took Abohas, Nimrod, and Ronald Kaboha went there. And so did Steve Omonyi, like I said, and a few other guys. And then so starts the Falcons dynasty as Blue Jackets is waning. And but Chatty had been playing all this time, even at that late age. So he decides to quit and just take care of Blue Jackets. Remember, at the peak of Blue Jackets' powers, Chatty was getting financial help from people like, you heard of Engineer Chris Azuba? You're a cricketer, so you'd have heard of him. Yeah, he was also a basketball player. Those are guys who used to graduate and then bring money in. Godwin Chihuguru and a few other guys bring money in, help him, buying sneakers for us, getting us some transport money and things like that when we were playing through and all. And then he had to quit. One of the things, of course, you credit him with, apart from all bringing through a whole generation, different generations of players, was then what happened at YMCA at that time when he quit. Because there are many clubs now, more players and everything. Chatty went and spoke with the YMCA guys and convinced them about bringing floodlights in. So he then talks with Meme. His basketball contacts helping him, brings the floodlights in and creates cages for them with lockable switches and everything. So we start playing night basketball there. Fuba begs him to allow them to use the floodlights for league games. He concedes. And then eventually it was too much. He considered even the control of those floodlights to YMCA and Fuba, and they took over there. And so Chatty slowly ebbed out into retirement. But even late into his 40s and all, this guy was still shooting the lights out. He could dribble, like I told you, like crazy. When I talk about handles, dribbling in Ugandan basketball history, Chatty, there are only 3 or 4 players I can talk about to compare who came after him. There was a kid called Joshua Masiko, one of the greatest dribblers you ever see here. Then I talked about Ken Balyajusa and perhaps say Ivan Enabu, not Jimmy, but Ivan. And then maybe now what Fayed Bale is doing. That kind of thing. But this is the guy who was the epitome of that, and also of shooting. And there's not been a shooter in Ugandan basketball as good as Chatty ever was since then, and yet now we're in the generation of shooting. He's a retired man now, rears some chickens in Kanyanya, takes over the family property in Namasuba, and chills. Grandkids are being born in grandkids are being born in Canada and everywhere. That is the man, the legend, the man who brought us up. Vincent Chatty.
I've seen him at a game.
You've seen him at a game,
for the first time, I wasn't in a hurry. At the time,
you wanted to listen to the Chatty story. It's amazing for me and most of the very many guys in Ugandan basketball now retired. We credit all our basketball to him.